There is something happening in most Jewish homes every single Friday afternoon, something so ordinary, so overlooked, that almost no one speaks about it anymore. And yet, according to the Talmud, according to the Zohar, and according to the oral wisdom my grandfather passed to me in the kitchen of our home in Tzfat, it may be the single most important preparation you make before Shabbat enters. Not the candles, not the challah, not even the table setting. I am talking about what you leave behind, what you allow to remain in your kitchen, in your refrigerator, in your home. When the sun touches the horizon on Friday evening, and the holiest day of the week descends. Because what I was taught, and what most modern families have completely forgotten, is that certain foods carry an energy. And when that energy is not cleared before Shabbat, it does not just sit there quietly. It interferes with the blessing, with the peace, with everything you are trying to build for your family in that sacred space. I am Rabbi Shlomo Katz. I was born in Tzfat, Israel, the city of Kabbalah, 71 years ago. I have spent 43 years studying the spiritual dimension of food, as it appears in Torah, Talmud, and Zohar. And what I am about to share with you today is part of what I call the 7 sacred teachings, rooted in the Shivat Haminim, the 7 fruits of Israel, named in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 8. Today, I will teach you about a practice connected to 2 of those sacred foods. But toward the end of this teaching, I will share something that my grandfather only revealed to family, a specific instruction he gave me on the last Shabbat we shared together before he passed. I have never shared it publicly before today. I grew up in the winding stone alleyways of Tzfat, the city that sits high in the Galilee hills, where the air is thin and the light is different. My grandfather, Reb Yosef Katz, was a Kabbalist in the tradition of the school of Tzfat, the same tradition that produced Rabbi Isaac Luria, the great Ari HaKadosh, whose teachings transformed Jewish mysticism forever. My grandfather's kitchen was not simply a kitchen. It was, as he once told me when I was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, a laboratory of the Spirit. Every surface, every vessel, every ingredient held intention. He would spend Thursday afternoon and Friday morning preparing for Shabbat with a seriousness I did not fully understand as a child, but have spent decades unpacking as a man. What I remember most clearly is the way he would walk through the kitchen on Friday afternoon, before the sun began to lower, and without ceremony, without drama, he would open the refrigerator, open certain cabinets, and remove specific things. He would hold them, sometimes briefly, sometimes longer, and then he would either finish using them immediately or dispose of them with a quiet blessing. He never explained it fully when I was young. He would simply say, "These do not belong where Shabbat is going to sleep tonight." It was only years later, sitting with him over the Zohar on a long winter Friday in Tzfat, that he began to explain the reasoning in full. He told me that this knowledge had been transmitted orally for generations, that it rarely made it into the formal sermons, that most rabbis of the modern era considered it either too mystical or too specific to teach publicly. But he believed, and I believe, that this is exactly the kind of practical, actionable wisdom that families need. If you have ever felt that your home was missing something on Shabbat, that despite all the preparation, despite the candles, and the kiddush and the beautiful table, there was still a heaviness, still a tension, still something that was not fully released, write the words Shivat Haminim in the comments below. I want to know how many of you are feeling that. Let me speak plainly about what is happening in many homes today. There is an epidemic of what I can only call Shabbat incompleteness. Families make tremendous effort. They cook beautiful meals. They buy good wine. They dress the table. but they carry the weekday into Shabbat without realizing it. Not in their hearts alone, in their kitchens, in the actual physical space of their homes. And the tradition is very clear that the physical and the spiritual are not separate. The Zohar, in the portion of Vayakhel, teaches that Shabbat descends like a queen, like a bride, into a home, and that what is present in that home when she enters determines the quality of her presence. If the house is not prepared on every level, spiritual, emotional, and physical, including what is in the kitchen, the Shechinah, the divine presence, cannot rest there fully. Modern life makes this harder than it has ever been. People are working longer hours. By Friday afternoon, exhaustion sets in. The cleaning gets done, but the discernment gets skipped. Nobody is sitting with their grandfather learning which foods need to be resolved before sundown. That transmission broke somewhere in the 20th century, and I am watching its consequences in the letters and messages I receive from families across the world. From Florida, from New York, from Argentina, from France, who tell me that their Shabbats feel empty, that their homes feel restless, that the blessing is not landing the way their grandparents described it. And this is happening at a moment in history when the need for that blessing is greater than ever. In 2023 and into 2024, study after study documented a sharp rise in household anxiety and family tension, in what psychologists are calling chronic low-grade stress that does not resolve even over the weekend. Sleep quality is declining. The home, which is supposed to be a sanctuary, has become another arena of the weekday struggle. I do not think this is a coincidence. I think it reflects the abandonment of practices exactly like the one I'm about to teach you. Because what I discovered through 43 years of study and through my own painful experience of ignoring this wisdom, and I will tell you about that moment, is that this is not one isolated tip. It is part of a complete system of 7 sacred foods and practices that work together. My grandfather called it a code. And once you understand that this clearing practice on Friday afternoon is one thread of a much larger weave, everything begins to make sense in a different way. There was a period in my 40s, after I had moved to the United States and was building my community work here in Boca Raton, when I became careless about exactly this. I was busy. I told myself the intention was enough, that the candles and the kiddush were sufficient. And for 2 years I felt a heaviness in my home on Shabbat that I could not explain. My sleep was disrupted. My study was scattered. My wife felt it too. She would say, "Something is not settled here." It was only when I went back to the specific practices my grandfather had taught me, including this one, that the quality of Shabbat in our home changed again. Within weeks. Not months. Weeks. That is how real this is. The practice I am teaching today centers on 2 of the 7 sacred foods, garlic and eggs, and their relationship to what the Talmud calls the energy of peeled foods left uncovered through the night. Now, you may be thinking, garlic and eggs, these are ordinary foods. And that is precisely the point. The most powerful teachings in our tradition are almost always hidden inside the ordinary. The Talmud, in the Tractate of Nida, chapter 17, teaches explicitly that 3 foods carry a specific spiritual risk when they are peeled and left uncovered through the night, and these are garlic, onion, and egg. The tractate names these foods specifically and connects them to the category of davar shenit galah. Exposed or uncovered things, which the tradition holds, are susceptible to negative spiritual interference during the nighttime hours. This teaching is not metaphorical. It is listed among the practical halachic instructions that the rabbis of the Talmud gave to households. and my grandfather extended this teaching specifically to the transition into Shabbat, explaining, based on the Zohar's understanding of the Friday twilight as a moment of extraordinary spiritual openness, that what is left uncovered, unresolved, or in a state of incompleteness in your kitchen as Shabbat enters carries amplified weight. Today, I am sharing 2 of the 7 sacred foods, garlic and egg, as part of this practice. Each of the 7, as named in Deuteronomy 8:8, wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates, carries a different dimension of the divine blessing. What I am teaching today sits at the intersection of this system in the way these specific foods interact with the sacred time of Shabbat. There are 7 sacred foods in total, and each one operates differently. Today is one thread, but understand that each thread becomes more powerful when the whole system is understood together. Now I will teach you the practice itself. This is variant B, a physical practice, a ritual preparation to be done on Friday afternoon between the hours of noon and 1 hour before Shabbat candle lighting. Do not rush into it at the last moment. The tradition teaches that preparation done in a state of calm and intention carries infinitely more power than preparation done in haste. The first thing you need to understand is the timing. In the Talmud Shabbat, Tractate Shabbat, Chapter 2, the rabbis discuss the obligation to inspect one's home on Friday afternoon before Shabbat. This inspection was understood to include not only shemetz, the leavened bread that must be removed before Passover, but in the deeper Kabbalistic reading my grandfather taught, any food that had entered a state of incompleteness or exposure that could not be resolved cleanly before Shabbat entered. What you will need for this practice is simple. You will need your kitchen to be quiet for a few minutes. Turn off the television, the podcast, the background noise. This is not superstition. It is the same principle that the Zohar in Parashat Yitro applies to the preparation of sacred space. Sound carries intention. The second element is a small bowl of water, plain, clean water, which you will place on your counter as a symbol of clarity and cleansing, in the tradition of the ritual washing that precedes sacred action in our practice. Third, you will need a clear awareness of what is in your refrigerator and on your counter. Specifically, any garlic that has been peeled and is sitting uncovered, any hard-boiled or soft-boiled eggs that have been peeled and are uncovered, any cut onion that has been left exposed. These 3 form the core of what the Talmud names as foods of particular spiritual sensitivity. The procedure is as follows. Begin by washing your hands with intention, reciting quietly or internally the awareness that you are entering a moment of sacred preparation. Then open your refrigerator slowly and look clearly at what is there. The garlic. If it has been peeled and is sitting in a small dish or a container without being fully sealed, either cover it completely and set it aside to be used at the Shabbat meal itself, or dispose of it cleanly with gratitude. Do not leave it in a state of exposure. The Hebrew word for this act of intentional covering is kisui, covering. And the Zohar uses the same word in the context of the holy vessels of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which were always covered during transport to protect their sanctity. You are doing something in the same spirit. For peeled eggs, the same principle applies. Either they are consumed before Shabbat, used in the meal, or disposed of. The Talmud's concern with the peeled egg is specific. An egg that has been peeled and left overnight, or in this context, left through the sacred boundary of Friday night, is said by some of the Talmudic authorities to gather a kind of spiritual residue that belongs to the weekday energy. You do not want that energy sitting inside your Shabbat space. For the onion, the same approach. Any cut onion that is not fully sealed should be wrapped completely. The Talmudic instruction is explicit that the cut surface, the exposed surface, is the point of vulnerability. After you have addressed these three, stand for a moment, 30 seconds, 1 minute, and look at your kitchen with gratitude. Say quietly, in your own words or in these, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, I am preparing this space for your Shabbat. May it receive holiness, blessing, and peace. Now, what can you expect from this practice? In the first Shabbat you observe it, you may simply feel a greater ease in the transition, a sense that something has been completed rather than left hanging. By the seventh Shabbat, and 7 is not an arbitrary number, it mirrors the 7 days of creation and the 7 sacred foods of Deuteronomy. You will likely notice a different quality to the peace in your home. The tradition does not promise outcomes. It teaches that when practiced with intention and with genuine care for the sanctity of Shabbat, the removing of these exposed foods creates a physical expression of a spiritual truth, that Shabbat is different from the rest of the week, and that difference must be honored in every dimension of your home, including the most practical. The sacred warnings in this practice are these. Do not perform this action carelessly or as if it is a chore. The intention behind the action is, according to Kabbalistic teaching, half of the practice itself. Do not be anxious about it. Anxiety is the opposite of Shabbat. The tradition teaches in Talmud Bereshot, Tractate Bereshot, chapter 5, that a mitzvah performed in a state of fear does not carry its full blessing. Approach this as an act of love for your home, for your family, and for the day that is coming. And do not substitute this practice with a general cleaning. The specificity matters. The Talmud is specific. The Zohar is specific. 3 foods, peeled, exposed. That specificity is intentional and reflects a precision in the tradition that we should honor. There is something I want to share honestly. There was a period, I mentioned it briefly earlier, when I rationalized my way out of practices like this one. I told myself that in the modern world, the spirit of the law was enough, that if I felt Shabbat in my heart, the physical preparations were secondary. My grandfather, had he been alive then, would have looked at me with that quiet expression he had, not angry, never angry, and he would have said, Shlomo, the body and the soul are one system. You cannot honor one while ignoring the other. He was right. And the world we are living in right now, a world where so many families are struggling to find genuine rest, where the boundary between work and home has almost completely dissolved, where Friday nights look the same as Tuesday nights on so many screens and in so many houses, this world needs this practice more than ever before. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 13, calls Shabbat an oneg, a delight, not a concept, a felt, physical, experienced delight. That delight does not arrive automatically. It is prepared for. And my grandfather spent his entire life organizing these 7 teachings, the 7 sacred foods and their practices, into a complete system. I am still in the process of sharing each one. This is one thread. The others deepen everything. Let me bring this teaching together before we close. The first thing I want you to remember is that the Talmud, Tractate Nida, chapter 17, explicitly identifies garlic, onion, and egg as foods of spiritual sensitivity when peeled and left uncovered. This is not folklore. This is the written record of the rabbis' understanding of the intersection between physical food and spiritual energy. The second thing I want you to remember is that the timing matters. Friday afternoon before Shabbat enters is a threshold moment. The Zohar in the portion of Vayakhel is clear. The quality of preparation during that threshold determines the quality of Shabbat's presence in your home. The third thing is the simplest and perhaps the most important. This practice is not about fear. It is not about superstition. It is about love. Love for your home. Love for your family. Love for the day of rest that the Creator gave as a gift. As it is written in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, remember the Shabbat day to sanctify it. That sanctification is active. It is physical. And it begins in your kitchen on Friday afternoon. You now hold something real. Something from a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. Use it with good intention, with gratitude, with the reverence that it deserves. This knowledge comes with a responsibility. The same responsibility my grandfather placed on me when he taught me. Use it to elevate your home. Use it to bring genuine peace to your family. Use it to make Shabbat the different, holy, extraordinary day it was always meant to be. In my next teaching, I will reveal another of the 7 sacred foods, one that my grandfather told me is the most misunderstood in all of Torah. It appears in Deuteronomy 8:8. It sits in every Jewish kitchen, and almost no one knows what it is actually doing there spiritually. You will not want to miss that teaching. If this one moved you, subscribe and turn on the notification so you are there when it arrives. And share this today with a friend, with a family member, with someone who prepares Shabbat and deserves to know this. Leave the word Shavat Haminim in the comments if you are going to try this practice this Friday. I want to know. And if you have questions, write them below. I read everything. Shabbat Shalom. Until next time.